Garrett, our first big game of the week is number 7, Tennessee, traveling to Athens to take on now number 12 and first team out of the college football playoff rankings, Georgia. Georgia is a 10-point favorite at home. That's a puzzling line for me when we've seen what these two teams have put on the field, especially in the last few weeks. But Garrett, if they're basing it on history, it's a good line because Georgia's won 7 straight in this series. Tennessee's last win was in 2016, ironically, a week after Georgia's last loss to Ole Miss before this past week. So history certainly on the side of the Bulldogs, but this current year might not be. It's a couple of offenses that are struggling to get going. I don't mean to rehash this Georgia conundrum that we've got, but it really is the main storyline. Both of these offenses really struggling to get going. In SEC play this year, Georgia's averaging under 400 yards of offense, only 111 yards per game on the ground, and 2.14 turnovers per game. 11 turnovers in the last 4 games for the Georgia Bulldogs. Most of that courtesy of one Carson Beck. Tennessee hasn't been much better. Tennessee, 24.5 points per game. Again, also under 400 yards of offense and right around 200 pass yards per game. Nico's questionable. Josh Heupel said that Nico is going to be good to go, but then we had a report. I don't know how credible this is and what information he has, but the Bear, Chris Felicia, told UGAsports.com that he has intel that Nico will be out with a concussion. So Heupel saying one thing to the media, Chris, the Bear, Felicia saying he has sources that contradict that. Garrett, this is going to be a really interesting game. And for me, it's copy and paste for last week. Tennessee has a really solid pass rush, but as 10-point favorites, can Georgia protect Carson Beck? And then can Carson Beck take care of the football as if he has good protection?
I just think the answer is probably no right now. I don't think Georgia's shown you anything to really say that they're going to take care of the ball. And that seems like such a low bar for Georgia because we're not talking about can they be explosive? Can they hit those big plays over the top? You know, in previous years, we've said, well, they got a pretty good run game. What can they really get going in the pass game? Can it be balanced? We're not having any of those conversations right now. We're saying, can you just stop throwing picks? Like, can we just find a way to somehow not turn the ball over all the time? This is not where Georgia wants to be as an offense right now, especially considering the fact, yes, they get this game at home, but especially considering the fact that Tennessee has a top 5 scoring defense and they only give up 100 yards on the ground. Georgia already doesn't really run the ball very well. I think that's going to be a glaring problem for Georgia. They're going to get a lot of long down and distances. I don't think they're going to be able to establish the run very early on. And I think this is going to spell some disaster because if you're forcing Carson Beck to drop back and convert, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7, those type situations, I don't think he's going to do it over the course of the game, not against how good this Tennessee defense is. And when you combine that with the fact that you can also, as a Tennessee team, Nico or not, I'm taking Nico out of the equation for this. This Tennessee team, led by Dylan Sampson, their star running back, is good enough to just play ground control, own some time of possession, run some clock, and that's the stuff that travels on the road anyways, right? We always say this, if you're going on the road, you need your run game, you need your defense. That's what's going to come with you. That's Tennessee's bread and butter. Tennessee is going to be able to play their game, and what I get worried about from the Georgia side is if things start to spiral, what happens with that fan base, right? That's a fan base that rightfully thinks that they deserve, or at the very least expects a high level of success. If they start to go down 3 points at the end of the first quarter, 7 points at the end of the half, they're down 10 going into the fourth, it's going to get a little restless in Athens. And, as much as they're going to support their team, things can get real ugly after, the picks start rolling in or, another 3 and out on a long, incomplete pass because it was, 3rd and 11. They got themselves behind the chains again. It could get really ugly, man. And I'm not saying that this is blowout territory. I think this will be a close game. I don't think either team really has blowout in them right now. But I think Tennessee has the formula right now to win this game.
I think they certainly have the formula to win the game. I'm concerned about them if they're starting a backup quarterback because we have seen the ceiling of this Georgia defense. I know a lot of people have forgotten about the Texas game, and rightfully so. It's been a while since we saw Georgia play to that ceiling. But defensively, they still do have that ceiling. I know they didn't look great against Ole Miss, but they still held that offense to only 28 points last week. I know a lot of it was field goals, and they scored on a lot of their drives, but still holding an Ole Miss offense at home to 28 points is still something to hang your hat on as a defense. I think this is going to be an ugly game. I expect several turnovers by both teams, regardless of who's playing quarterback for Tennessee. I expect the defensive lines to wreak havoc on both opposing quarterbacks. So I'm expecting a really low scoring game. The best bet here might be the under. I don't have that in front of me, but the under is probably going to be the best bet. Looks like it's at 48.5 right now. So yeah, give me that under. I'm going to take Tennessee to cover, but Georgia to win. And I know it's a 10-point spread. It's a really weird spread. Really surprising that it's this wide, right? I was shocked when this line came out, but I think the quarterback questions with Tennessee, I think Georgia, the fact that Georgia's playing at home, they have not lost a game in Sanford Stadium since 2019. It was October 12th, 2019. They lost a double overtime game to South Carolina. That's the last game they lost at home. It's been a long time since they've lost on their home turf. I still am clinging to some semblance of what I think Georgia is as a program. That might completely go out the window, and maybe it should have gone out the window last week when they lost to Ole Miss, but I still think they can get it done outright at home. I am going to take the Vols to cover them.
I'm taking Tennessee, man. I think that the
Taking
Tennessee Vols are
Tennessee
going to get
outright?
it done. I'm taking Tennessee outright. I think that they're going to win this game. I think Dylan Sampson has, a explosive run in the fourth quarter, nail in the coffin type thing, and rips off a 60-yard touchdown, something like that. Because realistically, like I just don't think this Georgia team is what it has. I think Georgia's going through their Ohio State moment from last year, where Ohio State last year didn't quite have the quarterback play, maybe didn't quite have the offensive coaching. Something was just kind of stinky in Columbus last year, right? Flip it to Georgia. I think something just kind of stinks in Athens right now. I don't know if it's, culture is a problem. I don't know if it's the wrong guys in the locker room. I don't know if it's, egos or whatever, but they just don't have it. They don't have it on the line of scrimmage right now. They don't have it on the offensive line of scrimmage. They don't have it. I think they're going to get whooped up front on the offensive side of the football, which is bizarre to say talking about Georgia that they're going to get whooped up front, but I think that'll probably happen. And yeah, I just think over the course of this game, it'll be a low scoring, slug it out, one punch, two punch, and just kind of having to respond to it. But man, I think at the end of the day, if I trust one of these teams to do anything right now, I'm going to trust Tennessee to run the ball. And if they have to give Dylan Sampson 40 carries in this game, I think they're going to give him 40 carries in this game, and they're going to say, go get us our win. And I think he's capable of doing it. I think this is a big moment for Tennessee. I think it's a big moment for Dylan Sampson. I think it's a big moment for that fan base. And I love the history behind Georgia, but they just lost to the team that wasn't named Bama for the first time in however many attempts. I think it continues, man. I just don't think the Georgia team is as good as we've seen them be in the last couple of years. I do think they'll get it right in the offseason, but I think we're starting to talk about the offseason this weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs.
It's going to take Carson Beck taking care of the football and not making dumb mistakes. He's really struggled with that so far this year. Like I mentioned, 11 turnovers in the last 4 games for Georgia. You keep that pace up, you're going to lose at home to Tennessee, and your season, like you said, is going to be over. This is also the last SEC game for Georgia. It's a last chance to get to 6-2 and have an outside shot at Atlanta. But yeah, it's a must win. You saw it today. If they lose today, there's no way that they can get back into the college football playoff field. They're already out of it. They already tumbled all the way out of it. So they've got to win their way back in. And like we said on the live show, reacting to the rankings, I'm really glad that the committee is making them do that.
Yeah, and I think that that's super fair and warranted. One more thing just on Tennessee's point. Even if they do end up going with the backup, Gaston Moore's been there for years at this point. He's been in the system. He's been around. And I think that's going to end up paying some dividends. Not because, he's been super experienced or he's got loads of playing time, but being around, being in the system, having a little bit of your wits about you, I think will pay dividends on the road. And being able to go on the road, be a little bit of a veteran, even if you don't have loads of playing experience, being able to say, I know the system, I know what this team looks like. If we're going to go out there and run, power right, power left, zone right, zone left, he'll know those plays. He's been practicing them for years at this point. I think the backup conversation is a little bit overblown. yes, you'd rather have Nico, you'd rather have the explosiveness he brings, but I don't think that you need to worry if you put the ball in Gaston Moore's hands.
They ran the ball 57 times last week, did Tennessee. So they're not scared
Run
to
at
just
60.
They're not scared to just give it to the running backs and give it to Samson and let that be the offense, especially with a backup quarterback. So we'll see if that's successful against Georgia's defensive line, because Georgia, for all their faults this year, has been really good against the run, has really limited those big explosive plays on the ground.
Gracious him. How about